A week from tomorrow, Phillies opening day. They'll have a couple scrimmages this weekend. And, of course, Bob Wankel covering the Phillies, crossingbroad.com, with plenty of insight on the team to update everybody on what's happening at Citizens Bank Park. As he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline, we're going to get some more insight. Now, I will ask you this, Bob. Vince Velasquez. Now, we were just having a discussion on who are some of the most frustrating players in the city. Velasquez belong on that list, or is he just past that now, where we shouldn't be frustrated with anymore? He's just who he is.
I think we may become frustrated by him all over again based on what he's done over the last week and a half down at Citizens Bank Park. Last time we talked, I had probably told you that Vince Velasquez was in line to be the fifth starter, and he's really starting to cement that role, I think. And, I think I might be getting duped again. We all fell in love with him after that first start against the Padres with the 16 strikeouts and the big fastball and all that stuff, and it just never materialized and almost through 100 career starts now. But he's coming back, and JT Realmuto is talking about how he's added a cutter and how the changeup looks a lot better and that they're trying to really reinvent his game. And to this point, he's been very impressive in the couple of appearances that he's made against Phillies hitters. So right now, on merit, Vince Velasquez is going to be the Phillies' fifth starter, and, we'll see what happens here, but they're starting to hype him up again a little bit. And so if he came off of the most frustrating athletes list, he might be right back in play for it about a month from now.
That's very frustrating to hear, actually. Bob Wankel's with us covering the Phillies. So is he in line to be the number 5 guy? They only have a week left to go. Is it really even a competition, or is this Vince Velasquez going to be their 5?
I suppose that Nick Pivetta could pitch his way back into consideration tonight. He will take a handful of innings, but Vince Velasquez has definitely looked sharper between the two of them. I talked to Brian Price, asked him a question the other night about Nick Pivetta, and he's really tried to focus on developing a changeup, which is so important to him because we talk about Nick Pivetta's fastball and how he has this big, powerful arm. But, guys slugged over 500 against his fastball last year because he's really a two-pitch pitcher, and he struggles with his command. And, Brian Price was very complimentary of him and said, he's developing it and he looks good. But the way that Price responds to questions about Vince Velasquez, it's just a little bit different. He's complimentary of both guys, but your eyes, if you've looked at both of them down there at Citizens Bank Park over the last 14 days, Velasquez just looks sharper, and I think that there's more of a belief that there's something they haven't unlocked in him yet, whereas with Pivetta, I think they feel like this is kind of what this guy is, and I think when it gets to who makes a better fit in the bullpen, I also happen to believe they think that Nick Pivetta is the better bullpen fit. So barring something crazy, which is certainly in play here over the next, whatever it is, 8 days or so before the regular season starts, a variety of different things can happen, obviously. I think the Vince Velasquez is all but wrapped up the number 5 starter job at this point.
What do you think Nick Pivetta's biggest problem is? Because he definitely has the stuff, and we've been saying that for so many years. I'm sick and tired of actually hearing myself say he has the stuff, but I don't know. I don't even know if he can work in the bullpen, in my opinion. What is his biggest problem?
The biggest problem is that he's a two-pitch pitcher. He's a fastball, curveball guy. He threw a show-me slider at times last year, and that's why the changeup is so important because, yeah, he has a power fastball, and the curve at times is a decent pitch for him, but it comes and goes, and then he really relies on just solely his fastball. So the ability to develop a changeup would make a huge difference for Nick Pivetta. But the fact of the matter is, we're not talking about a kid that's, a year into his professional career here. He's certainly guys over time have developed pitches as they've gotten into their mid to late 20s and they've evolved, but he hasn't really shown the ability to do that. And he started, I guess it was, and I might be getting my days mixed up here, but I believe he pitched on Saturday. Friday or Saturday at Citizens Bank Park, and the first inning he struck out the side, but then the second inning he was out there, he gave up 5 runs, and there was some hard contact too. He didn't get blooped to death out there, and it looks like the same thing that it's looked like the past 2 seasons, and I just don't see that evolution. He desperately needs a third pitch that he can depend on, and without it, I think that a late inning reliever, maybe even a middle inning reliever, is his upside at this point. I'm just not a believer in his game anymore. I've seen enough of it, and I don't really care that he consistently hits 95 miles an hour with the fastball. It's not enough in today's game.
Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, covers the Phillies. I know last time you were on, you really endorsed Roman Quinn, but then, Hazley's had a couple of nice games. He double in the gap, couple of hits. How's that center field looking? And does Girardi know at this point?
He's not telling us if he does know. He says it's wide open. He keeps talking about how, impressive Roman Quinn specifically has been. My opinion on this battle hasn't changed. Adam Hazley has done a nice job in recent days. I just think that when it's all said and done, Roman Quinn has more upside. And, my rationale for playing Quinn is that I think he's just a more dynamic player and that the Phillies are a little bit behind the curve in terms of talent in the NL East. And I think that Roman Quinn can do more for you to bridge that talent gap between the Braves, the Nationals, and maybe even arguably the Mets. That being said, both of these guys are going to play a lot, assuming that they stay healthy. It's not like Roman Quinn's been fantastic and Adam Hazley hasn't been, and I'm not necessarily trying to say that Adam Hazley doesn't deserve to play on this team. I think that there's going to be enough opportunity that both guys play quite a bit. But right now, to me, I just think that Quinn brings a little bit more to the table, and I had to say one of these guys were to get the lion's share of starts. For me, it would be Roman Quinn. But, I don't think either way that it's going to be a 70-30 split. I think you're still going to see roughly a 60-40 and possibly even be a 50-50 split between these two players when it's all said and done.
I can't believe I'm going down this road, but how good does Andrew Knapp look? The thing is, with JT Realmuto in a 60-game season, how much time could he possibly even get in there as well?
I'm so glad you brought this up. I really wanted to talk about Andrew Knapp today. Listen, JT Realmuto said he wants to catch 50 to 55 games over a 60-game schedule. I don't know that Joe Girardi's going for that, but listen, Andrew Knapp was horrible last year, and there's really no way to sugarcoat it. I mean, he had 215, and it just seemed like he made a lot of big outs in key spots. And the problem is that the way that the Phillies constructed their roster last year, he had to take on meaningful pinch hitting opportunities, especially late in games for the Phillies, and that's just not what you want, really from any backup catcher, but especially Andrew Knapp. And Andrew Knapp specifically is a little bit frustrating because in 2015-2016, as he was progressing through the minor leagues, he showed some offensive capability, but after an okay year in 2018, he was just abysmal at the plate last season. That being said, he's looked good over the last 2 weeks. And I tweeted out last night, hey, listen, hear me out. Andrew Knapp has looked good. He's bouncing around a little bit, a lot of energy. You can see why his teammates like him. He's been swinging the bat a little bit, and he's looked okay. And, I mean, I can't describe the response that I got to that tweet. I mean, just people absolutely don't want to hear that. No, you cannot put too much stock in what happens over a 2-week stretch in the summer camp, but I'd rather see a guy do it than not do it. And to this point, Andrew Knapp's looked okay. So if he starts 10 to 12 games behind the plate for the Phillies, is that the end of the world? Like, I really don't think so. If you're relying on your backup catcher to be a difference maker for you and you're getting that upset about your backup catcher, to me, you have serious problems with the rest of your roster construction.
What's Nola's prospect of starting on Friday?
I believe he is in line to start that game. Girardi had hinted at as much. I believe it's going to be Nola Scherzer on Friday. I would believe if all goes well in that start, I know that they've been a little bit cautious with him, but if all goes well in that start, I believe that would put him in line to start on opening day. The only consideration that you have to kind of look at here is the availability of Zach Wheeler, and I don't mean in terms of health, but his wife is due to give birth right around the start of the season. Perhaps that situation may dictate a scenario where the Phillies say we need to make sure that we get a start out of him. So they could perhaps go with Wheeler in game one if they wanted to speed up that timeline to ensure that they get that game. But if everything kind of remains status quo, I would expect Aaron Nola, despite the fact that Joe Girardi hasn't committed to him yet as the opening day starter, to make that start next Friday against the Marlins. And just really quick on Nola, he pitched the other night and was fairly sharp. The first 2 innings, he was very efficient, struggled a little bit in his third inning with command, but I think that he's on track. I don't know that he's going to give you 80 pitches in his first start, but I do think that, 7 pitches realistically in game 1 or 2 for Aaron Nola, I think is something that you can probably bank on at this point.
How good does Gene Segura look at third base? I saw a couple plays going around Twitter of some beautiful defensive effort.
Surprisingly good. I think that there was a little bit of concern about him moving over to third base just because, at times last year he wasn't great up the middle. And now you're moving him over to third. It's a totally different situation. But he made a play the other night where he went down to his knees, and he essentially flipped the ball at a submarine angle across the infield like it was absolutely nothing and got the runner by, a step or two. And he's been pretty smooth over there. He's made plays laterally. He's made plays on the charge coming in. I'm not predicting a gold glove in 2020 for Gene Segura, but he's looked more than adequate over there. And so much so that even if Scott Kingery is a little bit behind here, which they're easing him back in now in these inter-squad games, even if Kingery's not ready, it looks like Segura is going to be the third baseman regardless. So, I think that lets you know the Phillies' comfort level with him defensively at this point as well.
Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, covering the Phillies. They open up on Friday. Spencer Howard, Bohm, those are the two guys I think most fans are most intrigued as to their status. Anything cleared up about those two guys and their opening day status?
I don't foresee either on the opening day roster, and I do think that ultimately service time considerations are going to take a priority here. I think that is a factor. I said about 2 weeks ago coming into this before we really saw anybody get out on the field that I would have liked to have seen Spencer Howard get that number 5 starter spot because, A, you want to learn a little bit about the kid, and B, it's not Vince Velasquez and it's not Nick Pivetta, and let's see something else. Let's see a kid with a little bit of upside here and see what he can do over a 60-game schedule. That being said, you do have to consider service time, and to be perfectly honest with you, Vince Velasquez has looked impressive, and to the point where, like I said at the beginning of this call, on merit, he probably looks most prepared right now to inherit that role. Now, if things go south for Vince Velasquez very quickly, which they absolutely could, then I think maybe they consider Spencer Howard at that point. But I would not expect Spencer Howard in this rotation, at least in the first few weeks. I think that it's really going to depend on a variety of situations. Do guys stay healthy? Do they stay off the COVID-19 list? How does Vince Velasquez perform? And we kind of have overlooked Zach Eflin in this whole thing. Zach Eflin can really give you some strong starts in 5 to 6 straight starts, and then he can just completely blow up. And he's a big question mark in this too. But if those two guys stabilize and they give you quality innings, Spencer Howard, I think, may be up eventually when we get toward the 3rd, 4th week of August, but it may be in a bullpen role. So at this point, I would not expect to see him. As far as Alex Bohm goes, he's kind of had a weird camp. He's had a lot of hits down there. He's had almost every game. It seems like he has at least a hit. The only thing I'll say is that he doesn't square up a ton of baseballs. Like, given his size, I'd like to see a little bit more pop, especially from a corner infield type player. But he has like a lot of just, flares out into center field, 3 hoppers through a hole. He did hit one the opposite way into the right center field gap a few days ago for a double. And he struck that ball pretty well, but I would like to see a little bit more authority in his contact right now. And we haven't really seen that yet. My guess is you'll see him again at some point throughout the course of this season. But I would also be surprised as it stands right now if he broke this camp on the opening day roster.
Anything on Rhys Hoskins? It's a big year for him, and I haven't really heard or seen much about him hitting the ball well.
Yeah. I want to be careful about how I say this. Ooh. I had concerns coming into the spring about his reworked batting stance. I think it's very hard to gain timing with this stance. I think that losing the 3 months, no matter how much cage work you do, presents an entirely different problem for almost any hitter, but especially when you're trying to totally reinvent your stance like this. I think that creates a tough situation. And to be perfectly honest with you, he has not stood out. I'll say that. I guess that's the most polite way I can say it. I don't want to say he looks horrible. He's collected a couple hits in recent days, but I have not been overly encouraged by what I've seen from Rhys Hoskins thus far. A lot of, just getting under the baseball, a lot of weak fly balls so far, and that's really just kind of what I've seen. I want to kind of qualify that by saying you don't want to put too much stock in what you're seeing in these games, right? Like, you can only go by what we have in front of us, but it's not a terribly big sample, and there's nobody there, and there's just not a lot of juice for these games. A few of them, the coaching staff has been playing prominent defensive innings early on in these scrimmages, and I don't know. I think that sometimes it's kind of hard to lock in. At the same time, like I said about Andrew Knapp, you want to see a guy do it as opposed to not do it, and Rhys Hoskins really hasn't done it, in these games over the last week plus. So we'll see, but I haven't seen anything that makes me go, oh, wow, here comes a breakout. And that's not to say it won't happen, but you haven't heard a whole lot about him because there really just hasn't been much to say.
I'll leave you with this. Any thought on how Girardi might stack that lineup?
I haven't really given too much consideration to it, only because we've, really been focusing more on who's going to make the roster and what the opening day roster, this 30-man roster, is going to look like.
So when he does the inner squads, they don't do like the projected starters against.
Yeah, they do. I mean, I would tell you that in a perfect world that you'll have Harper, Hoskins, 3-4. It really depends. I think that you're going to have either Quinn or Hazley, whoever wins that job, hit leadoff, and then I believe that Segura will probably be the two-hitter. You'll probably see Real Muto 5. I know I'm jumping numbers all around here, but I'm just kind of plugging them in. I think Gregorius is probably your 6, and then you'll go from there. So, I mean, I think those are –
You left out McCutchen. McCutchen not hitting leadoff?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, McCutchen. I guess, I mean, it really is going to come down to what they want to do. If it's Hazley, you might see him hit 7th. If it's Quinn, he might hit 2nd. That would depend on what you're doing with Segura. I think McCutchen probably will hit leadoff at the start, but I could see a couple different scenarios based on lineup construction, depending on who they go with Quinn, Hazley, where McCutchen could hit 5th even. So they have some flexibility. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't know that they have that in cement yet. But I do think that whatever we see on Friday night will probably be a pretty good indication of what we're going to see a week from Friday.
Great stuff. Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad. Phillies this weekend, a couple exhibitions, and then Friday they'll do it for real a week from tomorrow, that Friday. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Bob, take care, pal.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Excellent stuff, Bob. As always, here from Crossing Broad, as the Phillies Sunday, they will play the O's.